old enough to comprehend, but young enough to dream. And I can still hear the rhythm of your breathing beneath that canopy, while the wind played brush on the snare, and God threw his bolts of lightning, like the thunderclapped clave, to complement the whistling moving through the trees. And remembered you promising that when we grew up, you'd build a home for me. And I would start growing, and you'd curl up your fake mustache like your favorite character in your favorite movie and whisper, I'll be your Huckleberry. So in the morning, when I snuck back to my room, I thought tragedy indeed that innocence, if ever it was, can be stripped away without a warning, my king. By grace, or by fate, or by luck, or by mercy, I trust the moon will carry your letters safely to me. This flood rescinding, it'll give way to land depending, and like the hand of God gave olive leaves to encourage that ancient family, my dove, with love, sincerity, and all that I have to offer. Your queen. But my everything! I found your letter inside of a bottle, and I didn't know what to say, but it was broken further down the cove. Ink spilt hallowed, but such a shallow grave. Read your poem like it was life in itself. Starved for hope like the waters were too hard to navigate, but it figures. If I was going to build us a home, well then your heart would find its way. It smelled of sea salt and your father's favorite poison, and I will never, ever, ever forget that day. College rule lines clouded by the liquor, like a watercolor painting that absorbed the spectrum with blue and hues thereof, or like a piece of bread to absorb the damage. That bottle of seed was shattered against the seashell, and rewrote the story that it would tell to any little girl who might pick up that whitewashed tune, expecting to hear the ocean, listening for the crescendo and the crash when it lasts. To hear the echoes of your whispers, these bottles will carry my heart home, and the currents will be kind, and my lover's letters will return to me. Our children will grow to find that all is not for naught, and the wall is not yet healed. Their parents, they worked hard for it, and the storms honor their appeals to see that though my father is drowning, his bottles float above the waves, and though I used to dread the water, its waves will be faithful to crash every day until at last I see your face. Things aren't the same. I've been picking up splinters of lumber from the floorboards and wondering about all of our splintered promises, like even though we didn't have control over their breaking. Oaths like those don't account for much. I loved the beach for the way the breath of God rose out of the deep, and I hated the sand, but I tolerated to hold your hand and watch the sun sink into the sea. Feet buried beneath the surface, molten love buried just beneath the surface, erupting, volcanic, unable to keep beneath the surface that broke like our parents' dormant surface level. Crater of a marriage that looked more like a coffin every time I read the note that I stole out of my father's casket before it closed. He wrote it to my mother, this woman I never met, but it made me feel just like I knew her. And this is what it said.
People will come, Ray.
Okay. Dear diary, grandfather's as creaky as his front porch, loads his shotgun beneath the awning, spittoon restless for rain, carpenter's chair against the whistling air, rocking back and forth, rocking snapshot picture worth it. Just like the movies, she said that he loved baseball, and James Earl Jones, she said that he's got God talking inside of his thoughts as he's grounding those bases on his way back home. And if you build it, they will come. Baby listens to what the Lord said. But I've been getting pretty worn building for an entire decade. In a perfect world, we shouldn't have been allowed to lose sight of what it means to love wholly. I got a Polaroid hanging on my wall that a friend took of me and my angel. I remember the day like it's something that I can touch, but it's stuck in the square between the borders of the film, and I can run my fingers over our longevity in a memory that's spilled out in pen, and if a picture is worth 1,000 words, I've written down every one of them. I work hard, scarred, toil through the soil for the youth that I see in my friends. These journals are moments in time, snapshots in our lives, and in retrospect, age is an overexposed photo that the memories can't mend. I know my sweet seductress, and her name is depression. I know best beneath that demon, destructive oppression. In those Polaroids, she drove the ink into the canvas like a slave beneath his master's cruel hand. I hated that way, but I always wondered what I'd do without it. And so I do love the man, and I went for change. I begged for the movement, and the good Lord, he answered my prayers. But you don't know how to breathe easy when you let go of your habits. Even if your comforts let people gasping for air. Dear time, grandfather's is creaky in his front porch. Set like oil in the gun barrel, dip can kicked over the railing, sandpaper hand stuck behind thumbtacks on my wall. I've got an ache in my chest for every season I miss, and it gets worse when the snow starts to fall. There are butterflies alive in that couple's eyes, a few years since forgotten by all, and sometimes, when the phone rings, I can still hear their wings when you call. But I begged for movement and got what I asked for. I can picture the answer like it came yesterday. In the land of the gods, I think that things are timeless. But all of us are still prone to decay. You know, I still lift up hope for certain smiles in those photos of us when I pray. Time is a cruel lover. She breaks a house apart in its bones. Comfort is no good reason to stand still. And idle hands build nothing that you can call your own.
I mean to kill you in 1 minute, Dad, or see you hanged in Portsmouth at Judge Parker's convenience. Which would be?
The Duke.
I call it full talk for a one-eyed fat thief. Fill your hand, you son of a...
You gotta keep it kosher, you know? It's still good. There's time here. God, when the sun sets or escapes, there's a painter who paints, and when he paints, we just take in the ripples the paints make when they swell against the textures on the page, and name them waves. Back home, my other spent his nights all alone and thinks it's all about perspective and taking my thoughts captive. Be captivated by it. It's all counterfeit. It's all functional saviors that don't function or save you. It's all identity drift. It's all grandiose promises and exposed as illegitimate. It's the whale my father seeks and swears by like it'll bring unity to our family. It's the way my mother drove away the same day that she drove the man to drink. Called it killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Or 3, if you count me. I was a seed. She used to say I was the only beautiful thing that ever blossomed from her branches. I guess I wasn't beautiful enough to keep. The gun was cocked and loaded years before I ever watched her leave. But we always saw her finger on that trigger. Trembling. I've heard tales of lovers broken by the bullet that every single one of us might call our parents. For example, in 50 BC, Parthenius of Nicaea penned the Iranian lover into Narcissus' story, who gutted himself with a sword on a man's doorstep. In 880, open back to go in a mountain crevice, rejected and lonely, until only faint shivers of their whispers remained. And to me, this far removed, they are as clear as the day. With that nymph's voice in my head here in Poseidon's domain, for all of the fury with which Hymenaeus and that pagan deity prayed, for all of the fiction children believe, and by which we are betrayed, and despite the winds constantly driving and tossing the waves, and all our double-mindedness, I still hear the refrain, this is not your story. When I watch my dad walk starboard, I picture a pirate walking the plank, looking down into the water, terrified, only to see his reflection and fall so madly in love, he dives headfirst into himself, and becomes all that I argue with those echoes about what he deserved to be. I picture Nemesis like a John Wayne movie. I know you always loved the true grit, but at the end of the script, Maddie still doesn't have her dad back. I hope that one day we will be able to forgive, but until then, maybe presence is greater than answers. Or revenge. If Zeus cast my mother out to Hades, she'd still be just as gone as she is now. If you sent ghosts to tell me all of the reasons why I still can't sleep at night, I would be wide awake listening. If you could hear me. If you could hear me, I would rather have you than all of my answers. I would still rather have you than every single one of my answers. My love, when we were weighing anchor, I was weighing my options, thinking why, and knowing would satisfy. But if love is true, then the tide will carry mine. You know, I drown in the undercurrent before I let myself lose our happy ending. It's the future I miss the most. 17 years from now, I want to be younger and as carefree as I can be. I want you next to me to reflect all of the best of me. I want the fairy tale, port swing, morphing our upbringing into enough of a string to hang by and believe it can be redeemed. I was a man before I got the chance to be a boy. Mother said she wanted neither. Father said I was his joy. He kept on saying things like, enjoy your youth while you can. But when the cancer started taking its toll, the roles reversed, and I cannot fathom what it is like to be eaten alive. He said he had ants beneath his skin, but even then, he'd tell it in a bedtime story. Son, there are colonies of Englishmen with marching orders to see to it that the Indians become just like them, dressed up in distinguished garb to cover up their colors and civilize them. Well, he said, in a similar sense, I've got tuxedo black blood cells clothing those that bleed red. If you can laugh along with me, the irony is I'll be better dressed than I've ever been when I lie to rest here and there. And you wonder why that fort was always the one left standing. I made sure they won every time we played that game. And I had mud pots filled with rocks that I launched at the backs of those backstabbers, but admittedly, you can imagine, it was a short-lived fame. All my neighborhood friends bleeding from their heads and everything. Life is pain-itis. Anyone who tells you different is selling something. It's not true. The Dread Pirate Roberts may have been awesome, but that kind of theology is one hell of a downer to subscribe to. I know that there's beauty out there. I'm sure you can see it on the ocean, even if the crew has started to look as white as that whale they're chasing. I've been reading through Moby Dick. Okay? That book is so long. I don't really understand any of it, but Captain Ahab is looking pretty pale. Be careful. I've been building our tree house. I hid it far enough away so that when we run, we can stay. And I wrote out the location like a secret on a treasure map. However long your voyage, we'll have a place to call home when you come back. The ladder is nailed to the trunk, and I started hammering the foundation to be sure that we have something to build our future on. How I long for the day that I get to see your face. My strength. My hope. My soul. You are my song. 12 months ago today, we stood in silence, fading further and further away, and refused to say goodbye for fear that the farewell might solidify our fate. I knocked on every inch of this vessel to keep that fear from coming true. Goodbye is such a definite word, an infinite word, an intimate word, and in case you hadn't heard, There are no waterfalls at the edge of the world that fall off into eternity. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I've been bringing home scrimshaw to hang from the walls of the branches of the balcony. Father gave me 2 teeth from the beast that they harpooned last week, and they've been cleansing the creatures at dock. I've been busy getting my feet underneath these sea legs. I had a week or more to explore those foreign shores while the crew and the captain knocked at every brothel door. And I imagine I've got scores of siblings on this island. Like the captain is an island unto himself, given time. There are 1,000 orphans forgiving their fathers 70 times 7 times, and I met one of them that week who became a friend of mine. He reminded me of you. Don't be jealous. He wasn't quite as cute. He didn't have any of the tools that you've been using to build my shelter. God knows that I am going to need it, man. Always. Shelter. But we followed a road out to the country that he said he'd known about for years and claimed that it was haunted. Boys always tell those tales when they want to put their arms around you. Monster films were made for men on first dates. I went along. The landscape stood frigid, frost painted, and I contemplated the warm blanket that you would have been in all that cold. I saw ghosts every time I opened my mouth to breathe in and out, and pretended that it was smoke, like the bubblegum cigarettes that we used to get from the corner store before you died with your dad. Acted like they were opiates before the dance. The thought, it was like poetry. Difficult to define, but I am completely indifferent to what it means, so long as we are able to get lost in it. The boy and I met a mystic at the top of the mountain. The mist covered straight into, layers over her legs to keep the cold from coming through, but belly up, half a sundress. And she looked at us and said, "Get your head out of the clouds." So with the sun shining down, I've been thinking about what she meant. She gave a speech about separating herself and related it to the whales. Said when the seamen dig their talons in to empty them and burn their substance for oil, remember they had to separate to find their true worth. And with the white dividing her skeleton frame like a personified worldview, it was the cloudiest case for dualism that I have ever heard of. She told us her feet were evil because they touched the ground, ears guilty by association because they heard the sound, with a mind wicked that wondered and wondered about music. Love, and the men in the town below. I don't know. She sounds like my grandparents, trying to distinguish between antique Negro spirituals, somehow damned to hell for a pagan drumbeat and unholy. I just hope that if we're a true reflection of some magnanimous other, I won't have to assume that every inherent longing will finally be buried alive. We think that if God created everything good, she wouldn't stand up on a mountain, proclaiming inanimate objects bad, and demonizing the rest of creation. Like it's the tempo's fault she's stuck alone on a pedestal, cutting herself in half. I want to dance to the music, drink wine to the melody, make love in our treehouse. That's got to come from somewhere. It makes me feel alive. She was kind, but I declined to follow in her footsteps. Kissing the boy on the cheek to stick it to the man. We left for the great unknown first thing this morning. If I die at sea, I am going to be as holistically human as I possibly can be, and believe that I am made that way for a reason. When I sit on the pier and wait for that black abyss to swell and spit out your letters, my heart rises and falls with the water, and sometimes I just wish it would swallow me. Heaven, the expanse above, the tide rising and beneath the rain falling. I swear, sometimes breathing feels just like drowning, stuck here in between. But when your bottles float in, there is nothing as beautiful as their dim glow, and my heart longs after them. Their colors catch my eye. Dank bourbon of molded green protecting white sheets painted with calligraphic handwriting. Tainted with damp expressions of the bottle's history, but purely you. Purely you. I've been thinking about what beauty is, and no thinking has added beauty to it. All I know is that it points beyond itself. Like I long beyond your love notes. Like I long for you. I've seen the entire spectrum refracting off the ripples beneath my bare feet from the edge of this weathered dock and thought, God, there's gotta be more than this. I have no idea what to believe, but beauty pulls me beyond myself like I don't even have a choice. And I know that I don't believe in nothing. So where, my love, does the beauty inside the tree reside? Made up of atoms, identical and colorless. With the light of the sun merely vibrates in waves toward our eyes, striking tissues and moving along nerves like a telephone wire. To their endings, like telephones. I don't know. There's no actual color in the atoms of which the tree is composed or in those vibrations. Shape, size, color, touch. They're just the names that we call our sensations. And no amount of study can ever bring the notion of beauty to the tree. So when I don't know how, and I don't know how, help me embrace the mystery. Will you come home? This treehouse will not be that without you. This chapter is from the dad. He's bummed out. He's sad dad. Alright. Today, the first mate told me that my men intended mutiny. And I have condemned an entire crew in search of a fabled Leviathan that we would not know what to do with, and he existed in the first place. But we're sinking, he said, and your daughter is in love with the boy back home, dreaming that she is living his life. She's asleep in the cabin, and if you have even a hint of sobriety in between bolts from that last buoy she used to say goodbye, you'll turn this ship around. It's too late. We're drowning. Daughters of fathers just like mine, except theirs will live out their lives on land long after their daddies have died at sea. Some will remember them as noble men. The rest is having abandoned their roles for a pipe dream. All is good or god-awful as their imaginations allow themselves to believe. I don't know whether I care, or if I could not possibly care less. When we first set sail and pushed off to sea, I stood in the bow looking everywhere, but at my legacy. With that blue ribbon holding up her hair, eyes locked on the boy that I made her leave. Waving, I have been chasing this great white dream for as long as catching him stood the promise that I could substantiate every reason that I failed my family. Like I wanted to be a brave man! I wanted to prove to my life that I wasn't a failure. I wanted to tell my daughter that Daddy always tried, and tried his hardest. I tried my best to make it work. My best was always in their expense, and all the things that I idolized became my captives. They always became my captives, okay? And now that it's too late, I know that drifting is a deeper threat than betrayal. No one has to convince you to abandon anything. You just inevitably end up downstream. Then take your pride and wonder why the world keeps on shifting, convinced that you're still standing in the same place. You never mean to drift away. Maybe if you survive and find this, I was right about one thing. Your mother used to say that I was afraid, but apathy, it wasn't the same mistake, and I was never running. It's just that I was never fighting. Indifference seeks in subtlety, and subtleties can kill a man. It'll be of no difference to you. If there is a God, know that I will stand before her with no excuse, and I can only assume that he will weep. Tragedy indeed. That innocence, though it never was, could have been. I have combed every inch of this island looking for the final pieces of wood needed to complete our wooded treehouse. I marked the paths with cryptic carvings of arrows for right turns and bayonets for lefts, and eventually it drops off into a waterfall. And you can rest assured that if anyone sniffs out our steps, every adult will sneer and bet that no one would be dumb enough to jump off into it. Now, but we are growing, but child likeness is the only way to live, so hand in hand, give this whole life everything that we've got. And if that means jumping on really high rocks and in the water, then so be it. Telling ghost stories with our face-painted friends around the campfire with the love of God, no acoustic guitars. I hate campfire acoustic guitar guys. And we'll have sleepovers and sleep over one another. And you'll get a chance to see your wishes come true beneath the same stars that I heard you whisper to. And I pretended to be asleep all those months ago. We've been playing our games, but they're just not the same without you here to rescue me. Somebody always plays your dad, and I am constantly getting my head bashed in with the war club. You'll probably laugh when you read this, but you don't hear any of those sounds coming up from that town. Like I think that Disney is screwed. I think it's my time to come to your rescue. If all of our bottles find their way to one another, surely our hands can too. I've been sawing off branches to make room for our rooms and pitching them together to keep the moisture from coming through. I lifted the sail from in between the logs, nailed an engine to the trunk, and stood at the front to balance, keep myself from falling off. But it's not perfect, but it'll do. I'm gonna ride our house to come and get you. So the boys set sail and pushed off to sea, stood at the bow looking forward and out into everything, confident. And though we had no idea what the ocean